we need to progress. We need to get faster, more open to innovation, more open to be risky. I see quantum computing and engineering and technology as the next big technology there. And quantum is one of the areas where Austria can become the leading country in the future. So we need to be very careful in Europe. Be sovereign, become more sovereign, become more self-confident. Don't stick to the past. Negotiate again on eye level, but that's only possible if we come much more together and forget all these national interests.
Hi everyone. Before we get started, if you enjoy watching or listening to this podcast, please hit the subscribe button. It's free to do so, and it helps NFK Podcast to bring more exclusive insights and interesting guests in the future. And if you find this episode useful, feel free to give it a like or leave a comment with your favorite moment. Now, let's begin. Enjoy. Hello everyone. Today's guest is Kambis Kohansal, a serial entrepreneur and startup ecosystem leader with over 15 years of experience building, scaling, and advising startups across fintech, cleantech, health, and emerging technologies. He's deputy head of founder services at the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, WKO, or VKO, where he leads nationwide programs that have helped over 5,000 founders scale internationally, raise capital, and achieve sustainable growth, supporting more than 100 million euros in revenue in venture funding. Beyond that, he mentors founders, lectures on entrepreneurship and venture capital, and actively shapes innovation ecosystems across Europe. Thank you, Kambis, for joining me today.
Thank you as well, Nasib. Great to be here. And hopefully I can share some of the know-how and experiences I've made over the last couple of years.
Pretty sure. So to begin with, could you please tell us about a bit more about yourself and the path that led you to your current role at the VKO?
Sure. So I started at the VKO more than 5.5 years ago during, one of the mankind's greatest times, I would say, the pandemics. No, it was not the greatest times, but it was a very challenging times, particularly for the economy, businesses, and so on, due to closure, etc. But there I was, involved in two of my companies back then because I've been a serial entrepreneur, former founder in the tech and startup space since 2011, and I was fully involved in my two companies. One was affected badly because of the pandemics. One was affected very positively because, depending on the business model and product you have, you might have a good or bad effect. And I wasn't planning to join the Chamber of Commerce back then. I wanted to go into politics and policymaking at some point, but not 5.5 years ago. But as sometimes life is, opportunities and options are created. If you're disciplined, if you work hard, if you know the right people, then opportunities will be created. And because of one of my common acquaintances, together with the Chamber of Commerce, he told me about it. I should take a look at it. And I said, okay, why not? Let's check it. And meeting after meeting, I got more convinced. And this position was then created. It was the first time the Chamber of Commerce in Austria had a position like this, someone dedicated for startups. Because, in Austria, we have roughly 37,000 company foundations every year. And we consider only a small part, 1% to be precise, as startup companies. And they didn't have the experience and someone with practical experience who can serve the needs. So finally, we came together. I joined them together with my team. We're responsible for startups and founders in Austria. But before that, I was an entrepreneur myself. And then I moved into angel investing, venture capital investing. And now, the last couple of years, I've been in this position.
All right. And looking back at your career, which experience most shaped how you think about innovation today, and how does that perspective influence your work?
So, first of all, this is an intriguing question, and I will tell you why. Because I think there will never be a stop or ending to learning. So you learn every time if you do it very consciously, if you're willing to do it, and there's always room for more. And the more you know, the more you don't know. Why? Because once you widen your horizon, you see how much is there. And when new technology comes, it becomes even more. So I'm still learning every day, every week, every month. I learn from younger people. I learn from older people. For less experienced people, from more experienced people. But the thing is, so let me start with entrepreneurship overall. I think there are different traits you need to have to become a successful entrepreneur. You need not only to be dedicated, but you need to stay dedicated. Why do I say stay dedicated? Think about it. So entrepreneurship means ups and downs all the time. The goal is to move up, but there will not always be like a curve going up. That's unrealistic. So there will be days where you want to quit. There will be weeks where you love everything, and then it changes abruptly. That's how it is. So you need to stay dedicated. You need to stay committed. You need to be very disciplined, because if you always, delay things, if you always postpone it, if you don't structure your day so that you actually can fulfill all the potential you have, it will be very difficult. So discipline is very important. Think about it, from sports. Talent is important, but hard work, discipline, training, practicing is even more important. And that's how I see entrepreneurship. So these are the things, the traits I develop over time. I would say I had some kind of talent for entrepreneurship, but I also started, inexperienced. I had to learn a lot, gain experience and get better over time, not get too emotional. And all these things I learned, I could take with me in the other activities I started to do then. First of all, becoming a lecturer, then starting to mentor other founders and startups, then starting to invest, and finally at the Chamber of Commerce. Because one thing, let me tell you, I remember back then, there have always been approaches from people from startups and tech going into some kind of public space and governmental space. And a lot of them failed in the end. They quit after 6 or 12 months. And I wanted to change that. And let me tell you, what's the reason behind it? Why do I think did they quit in the end? And that's what I mean by failing. So they were doing maybe good work, but in the end they quit. Why? Because it was a change of dynamics and a change of culture. So people thought in the past, very often, when they come for practice, they come, to a public space, they will bring all the know-how, all the network, and it will change, and they will suddenly accelerate everything. But that's not how organizations works, because they're based on culture. So one thing, and I think this is the most important trait among entrepreneurs, also investors, but also in positions what I do now, is to be patient. To be patient. Still, it sounds difficult. Think about it. You have a product, you want to scale, you are impatient and so on, but you need to see things not just short term, but mid and long term, the next 10 years. And that's how you also should then structure activities and implement them. So you need to be patient, because some things will change faster and some things will change not so fast. And these are the traits that actually I think are very important.
Okay. And you mentioned culture. May I wonder, what do you mean exactly by that?
So every country has a culture. Every family has some kind of culture. Every organization and company has its own culture. Usually, if you build your business, the founders are driving the culture. How does it work? How do we want to work in this company? Usually, it's a reflection of their own characteristics. If you want to be fast, then you have a culture where being fast in terms of execution will be usually incentivized. If you want to have a culture that focuses on new stuff, new inventions, innovation, then you will try to incentivize people being innovative. If you have a culture where it's about respect in communication, then it means usually the founders, they focus very much on how they communicate with each other. So every organization, every family, every country has its own or her own culture. And there are big differences, and you can see very much when you work with founders early on, how they shape the culture. And the culture also over time progresses, sometimes changes, because if you're 5 people, it's different than if you're 50 people in the company, or 500 or 5,000. And that's what I mean with culture. So also, culture is not something that just happens. It has been created over hundreds of thousands of years. And I also believe that people bring their own culture within organizations. Sometimes they don't realize it, but how, in what kind of culture I was raised up, and how I was raised up, it shapes my characteristics and traits, and that's how I also usually would form my company, even if I don't do it intentionally. I hope this responds to your question.
Yeah. And Austria, let's speak about Austria's startup ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
So Austria is often described as solid but cautious. Do you see this as a competitive advantage, an edge, or a structural limitation for ambitious startups?
I mean, you can see everything with two perspectives, a positive one and a more negative one. So historically, Austria has been a source of entrepreneurship, of innovation. That's why I say historically, if you take a look the last couple of 100 years, think about it. Vienna in particular was one of the epicenters when it comes to economic policies, entrepreneurships, great minds coming together, not just from Austria, but from different countries. Austria was also bigger. Think about the Austrian-Hungary Empire. We had a lot of big economists, like Schumpeter, for instance, like Hayek. I wouldn't say it's now the same as it was before, because over the last decades, getting employed, having a comfortable life, was very much incentivized by the policies, and this can change the culture for entrepreneurship. Still, I believe we are a nation of entrepreneurs and founders, and you can see this because they're not just here, the Austrians, they're all over the world in the biggest hubs, and they build great products. They build great companies. So Austrians, as nations, are in the top 15, top 20 countries worldwide when it comes to unicorn per capita. Not meaning all the unicorns, so startup unicorns in terms of like a company, a startup that has a valuation of $1 billion US. They're not all here. They're spread all over the world, but Austrians are behind it. So they're in the top 15 in the world. And this is a strong indicator. Still, I think we need to progress. We need to get faster, more open to innovation, more open to be risky. After 15 years, I realized I'm just more risky than anyone else. I mean, I always had the feeling, but I would say that even when it comes to startups and tech and so on, I'm slightly even more riskier than, for instance, others. That's something I realized, in the last 2 years, actually. And that's also what has driven me, to do a new venture or set something up and so on. But being risk-aware is not always bad. I can tell you this as well. That's something I want to put an emphasis as well, because you see a lot of complaints, for instance, why we cannot bring more female investors into the venture capital space or angel investing space, because more and more women have wealth. They've built it up over time, particularly younger women in their 30s. They are now have built up their own asset classes. They are inheriting, as well. So there is a lot of wealth. But I would say that the venture capital space and the startup space is not always, it doesn't reflect how they invest. This could be a good or bad sign, as you want to see it. But it doesn't mean that it's bad for them, because I know a lot of women, I know you can see statistically, who make very profound decision making when it comes to investing. And that's why they build their wealth, compared to a lot of other male counterparts who are much more riskier, invest in everything and lose everything. So there are always ups and downs. I would prefer, Austria to become more riskier, be more open, not to be afraid, not to be too skeptical. But it's not always, just a good thing. That's what I also wanted to mention.
And if a highly ambitious founder asks you, whether Austria is the right place to build a globally disruptive company. What would your honest answer be and why?
Yeah. So, first of all, I believe if you're really a good entrepreneur, a good founder, I mean, you cannot compare all countries and all regions, there are differences. But if you're really good and really ambitious, yes, you can for sure build it from here and go global. Austria is a very internationalized ecosystem. 2/3 of all the economy in Austria is based on export. Startups in particular in Austria, they're very export driven in the first 2-3 years. There's a lot of experience there. And I also think lots of the founders I meet, they complain about the market, about the customer, about the users and so on. But I think actually they just didn't do the homework, because in the end they don't have a product market fit, because most startups I see, they fail because of a lack in product market fit. And also if you do check it statistically, number one reason is no market, or the market is not big enough, or not dynamic, it's not growing, etc. But in the end, it's about the product market fit. And if they complain about the market itself, the audience, the customers, and so on, I say, okay, they did a mistake, because they didn't research enough, and they went with the wrong go-to-market strategy. So getting back, I believe, and you can see it, you see a lot of great entrepreneurs and startups coming out of Austria, but for sure, other ecosystems from, let's say, Silicon Valley on the very top, to Paris, to now even Munich, that has become a very strong hub in terms of like deep technology and so on. Sure, you have more access to private capital, you have even more dynamic there, you have even more higher access to talent, and this can be a huge advantage to scaling. However, it doesn't mean if I just go to Silicon Valley, I will become successful. No, the competition is very high. This can either get you to become even more ambitious and try to compete, or it can lead to the other way, that you will actually fall behind. So it's not just about where you are, it's about your traits, about how you approach things, and also something very important to mention, the industry is important. So some markets are better if you want to focus, let's say, on AI. So if you say you want to build on the next LLM, go to Silicon Valley. But for instance, if you want to build the next quantum technology startup, Austria, for instance, is one of the hubs in the world. So it depends very much on the industry as well. I would say Austria is particularly a good source for B2B startups with a high technological component, meaning R&D, science, etc. behind it. But you also have some consumer-driven startups like WaterDrop, like Refurb, like Bitpanda. They're very successful. So we take a look at an industry, and I wouldn't always find excuses that everything else is, it's the mistake of the others. Usually it's a mistake of yourself, if you feel.
You mentioned quantum. Why quantum and Austria?
Yeah. So quantum is not the only vertical or area where a lot of things are happening in Austria. You also have energy, energy technology, climate. You have real estate. Two of the biggest European real estate startups come from Austria. So you have different areas as well. But quantum, let me tell you something about quantum. I see quantum computing and engineering and technology as the next big technology there, which is the basis for a lot of industries and sectors and products happening in the future. And Austria has focused in this area very early on, has two world-class hubs, one in Innsbruck, one in Vienna, who are among the leading hubs when it comes to research, R&D, science, in terms of like quantum technology. Still, I think we need to push for the commercialization even more, but quantum is still very early on. But if you take a look at published research papers, for instance, when it comes to everything related to quantum, Austria has the highest output per capita. So Austria is very strong here. China as well, US, but think about it, they're much bigger. Huh?
Yeah.
So I think quantum is one of the areas where Austria can become the leading country in the future. And this is very important because it's it builds the basis for a lot of sectors and industries in the future. Not the only one, but this is the one I see with one of the biggest potential.
I see. It's actually really, really interesting. And what is the one uncomfortable truth about the Austrian startup ecosystem that we still tend to avoid addressing openly?
So it's not just related to startups; it's related to all of Austria, I would say, and it's just as one thing. It's you might think, okay, why is there a lack of bigger capital rounds? Let's say 50 million upwards. That's something we're lacking. Why, in terms of like number of startups, in terms of quantity, our per capita ratio is lower third in Europe. Others have like much more when it comes to the size of the population. Why are there over proportionally startups abroad who are unicorns with Austrian founders? These are all truths. But let me tell you, I believe it's a combination of not being fast enough, not being risky enough, and that the ecosystem, when it comes to founding a company and regulation, is still dependent on too many manual processing in Austria. So first of all, I think we need to be just faster in decision making, including political decision making. So if we see there's a lack of scale-up capital, we need to implement now something that incentivizes it, and not 5 years later and 10 years later. We talked about being risky. I told you, it's not always bad to be less risky, but in some areas, we need just to push. That's it. We want to become number one in quantum computing, also in commercialization, push it, put everything there. And number three, I think we just need more automation, AI in the whole, founding process, making everything standardized, making very fast. Others have done it before, so it's possible. And I believe these three factors, they are the reasons for some of the things we're missing here, including, for instance, lack of scale capital.
And if you could change one structural condition then for startups in Austria overnight, whether that's regulatory, financial, or cultural, or something else, which would have the biggest long-term impact and why? Okay,
so the longest impact would have been anything related to culture. That's the truth, because the culture is the basis for everything else: politics, regulation, investing, etc. If I want to go practically, I would either do one of these two I just mentioning now. First, streamline the whole foundation process, make everything automated and digitized, whether you are from Austria or from Europe or from somewhere else. Founding a company as fast and as lean as it gets. That's one thing. The second is implementing some kind of tax incentive to leverage more capital going into this space. If I had to choose, I would go for the second one. This is more a practical approach. But in the end, it's culture. Because if you have the culture, you have this openness. You will change the regulation. You will implement the right initiatives. That's how I see it.
And all right, so let's come to the topic of, let's approach the topic of blockchain and crypto. When looking at the crypto industry as of early 2026, what is your opinion about it, and what are your assumptions regarding its foreseeable future?
I'm totally pro Web3, crypto, blockchain, and so on. And I think Vienna in particular has managed a good job until now. It's growing. It's attracting more international players like Bybit, KuCoin, more than 20 others are coming. We have also here very much like startups and companies having evolved apart from Bitbundle. You have also Blockbit and so on. So there are several ones. You have great organizations, private but also publicly related, who focus on it very early on. And Vienna has progressed, particularly in the German-speaking region. So I'm very pro. I want to push it further. And I wouldn't just see it as crypto, blockchain, Web3. I also would see it fintech, financial technology, payment technology is related to it as well. And I think we can get even more out of it, because Austria also historically has this very good structural outreach to Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe, we have a lot of talent. a lot of good students, a lot of good technical people. And I think we can use this more to get more startups in this space here in Vienna, in Austria, and not make them move somewhere else. So it's good to see how it has evolved over the last 10 years. I think still we, in terms of regulation and being fast and quantity, we can do more if we compare it to others. But that's one of the areas, apart from quantum, for instance, where we have seen strong progress.
And what about the foreseeable future? Do you see any particular implementation or manifestation of that technology, playing out really, really well, maybe even in an Austrian context?
So it's interesting, because whenever you see some kind of movement into a specific direction, you often see a counter movement as well. So think about it. You see a lot of AI, a lot of automation, but on the other hand, you see the other movement, a counter movement, who say we want to have it more human-based, personal. So I see, for instance, a market in the future where some products are fully automated and based on AI and so on, whether the hardware or software. But on the other hand, I see a customer audience who is still striving for more this human element, and they're willing to pay more for the same kind of product if it's made by humans. Why I'm telling you this? Because now think about Web3 crypto, finance, Aura, and so on. You see a lot of movement into digital payment. And you've seen it in the last couple of years, and you will see more. However, we're also now seeing, even in Scandinavian countries, there's a movement towards, again, paper-based money. Or you think, why paper-based money? Austria is actually quite leading, one of the leading countries still in Europe or worldwide when it comes to cash payments. The reason is security issues. Security-based issues. We live in a world that is geopolitical, as much geopolitical as never before. And for sure, there can be security attacks and cyber attacks on this kind of payment infrastructure. So they want to have, let's say, a fallback strategy. And for instance, if there's an attack on a payment structure, that still there are other valid options to use it as well. There's just one thing I can see. That's not technological, but just wanted to mention it because whenever you see a movement into a specific direction, you always see a counter movement as well. That's how I see it. Nevertheless, I think we will see more mainstream solutions. Crypto has started very much in a niche, has grown. It's in the top 10 biggest asset classes worldwide. That's not a niche anymore. I mean, particularly Bitcoin now. That's not a niche. That's mainstream, and it's getting more mainstream. So we'll see even more people using some kind of products related to it in whatever way. Particularly younger generation. For them, it will be more standard than it was for us or our parents. That's how I see that. This is not just payment. This can go to property, real estate. Last year, I invested myself, for instance, in a tokenized gem, based on emeralds, like the physical emeralds, which is like specific materials. You will see more and more this kind of asset-backed tokens and so on as well. I also see when we now talk about Web3, I really believe that we will have some kind of second world in terms of like a virtual one, which then again somehow has some mixed elements with the physical real world we know. I think this is something we are going into this, and this will create again new industries and new markets within this virtual space. So very interesting to see all these developments.
Let's stop for a minute. Here's a brief moment of context for those who may not know me. My name is Nasib Fathi. I'm a scientific researcher in the blockchain space, and I work with executives and organizations as a growth and media professional. My focus is crypto at the intersection of institutional finance, market structure, and regulation. You are watching the NFK podcast, where these topics are discussed through conversations with people shaping the development of digital assets space. I was about to ask you what about the institutional implications of crypto industry. So the question was, how do you see this trend manifesting in the Austrian context, or maybe in European as well? One of the interesting things is the stablecoin initiative, right? The consortium of banks and so on and so forth. But that's just something interesting to me. Maybe there is something else, or maybe this initiative that you would want to elaborate on.
Yeah, yeah. So digital euro, for instance, I see we are going into this direction, surely. Also, what is happening in the US before the new administration, it was not so open to this. Now they've changed it because of different reasons, also political and geopolitical reasons for sure. Think about what is if tokens, crypto, bitcoins will be seen as something similar to gold at one point, something that central banks use, to have, let's say, as a reserve currency. That's something. You see already with specific countries who have done this. Venezuela, El Salvador, and so on, but others as well. Even Germany has it to some extent, but very low. But that's something very interesting to see, because if the central banks start to use this as a reserve currency, that's a huge move. So, and I believe it's going into this direction. But let's see how fast.
Okay, and which blockchain or crypto use cases in Austria are generally creating value today, and which are still driven more by narrative than real impact?
I mean, the blockchain in particular, where has it really been adopted by the market? It's crypto related, Bitcoin related, crypto related. I mean, there are approaches in health, logistics, defense. Think about it, the defense industry, security industry, where you need even more security. So I see there are cases. I wouldn't say, apart from crypto or Bitcoin and so on, that blockchain has not until yet really penetrated the market to a larger extent. Still could happen. I mean, there are a lot of cases, but for larger audiences, usually related to some kind of finance related thing. But let's see. So I think when it comes to security, will be very interesting. Defense, cybersecurity, and so on. Also in combination with quantum technology, by the way, because quantum technology actually is the technology that can also break into all this stuff. That's what they actually are feared when it comes to blockchain and so on. Quantum technology is the one actually that changes everything. So it will be very interesting to see.
Do you think that today's crypto industry has been already absorbed by the very systems it was once aimed to replace?
Yeah, I mean, I believe crypto started very idealistically, like a lot of movements. Then you saw more and more speculative stakeholders entering the market, which somehow put to some extent, a bad image when it comes to crypto and so on, because of some certain players. And over time, it became bigger and bigger. And this led to big institutional stakeholders who saw now the real long-term market potential and business behind it. And they started to enter it. The big players, the big institutional players, private and public ones, have entered the market and bought a lot of these tokens and assets and so on. I think there were worse times when it comes to crypto being seen as scamming and speculation, because now the institutional players, once they enter, it gives just more credibility in the mainstream with the average person. But it started idealistically, then the speculators joined, and then the institutional players. And now the question is really, will it be still the same as it was initially planned from an idealistic perspective? Not sure. Okay, not sure, because one of the core aspects is decentralization, and not being dependent on one centralistic stakeholder or player and so on. Let's see how it turns out when also the central banks and etc. enter actually more and more into this space. It will be very interesting to see. I'm not sure. Okay, maybe some elements of it, I guess it will be some kind of mix.
AI, so artificial intelligence, let's talk about that as well.
Mhm.
AI is advancing faster than most institutions can adapt. We have figured that out throughout this conversation as well. I mean, we touched upon it briefly. So, where do you see the biggest gap between technological capability and institutional readiness in Austria?
I mean, if you take a look at AI adoptiveness by, let's say, companies per country, Austria is not overall doing so bad. There are better countries in terms of the rankings, but the thing is, I believe technology in a lot of spaces are already available, but it's about the adoption behind it. How fast will be adopted, not just from a regulative perspective, but also from a practical perspective. Because think about it, autonomous driving, the technology is there. But where in the world do you see full adoptiveness? China, some specific regions, maybe Shenzhen and so on. In the US, in some areas, maybe in GCC and so on, but it's still not fully adopted. And why? Not because of the technology. The tech is here. It's because of regulation, practical readiness, and acceptance by the human mind, by the human itself. And there's always a lag usually until it really becomes mainstream. Now getting back to Austria, I would say that most companies in Austria are fully aware about AI in terms of it has been changing the market, the business, their own business model maybe, and so on. They're affected. They have started using it, to streamline some processes, to automate some processes. Sometimes they don't see then the big positive effects they would have expected. Why? And this is not just related to Austria, but companies in general, because they try to automate a already bad process instead of changing the process. That's one thing. Second, it's easier if you start a new company that you say, okay, AI first. 10 years ago, it was mobile first. Now it's AI first, meaning product development process, the business modeling, the scaling, everything you can put into AI into it. But if you are already an existing company with a specific culture that has been there for decades and all different people, it's not so easy. It can be pushed by leadership, but it's not so easy. I'm telling you, it's more complex. But what you can see, and this is something we should be aware of. So I believe that we will have more companies, much more companies with less employees. Whether you're a startup or a big multinational, we will see bigger companies that grow a lot, even more maybe, and scaling more, but with less employees. Why? Because of the use of AI. I can tell you a lot of the bigger companies in Austria, industrial companies, they're already working for some years now how to use AI, but also robotic, for instance, to decrease the number of employees they have over time. And this is happening already and will happen even more because they're automating a lot of the processes. So that's how I see it. Still, we need more adoption. We need to be faster. Startups, for sure, are very fast, but we need to see more in the SME segment and in the mainstream. I wouldn't say that the mainstream has fully adopted it, so mainstream of companies, but a lot are already using it to some extent, at least.
Where do you see all these workers that will be left without the jobs? Where do you see them going? Yeah,
it's always this kind of discussion, technology comes, what happens with the people and so on. So it's not the first time. Humans are not here for just the last 50 years or so, or 100 years, centuries, thousands of years. So there always been some kind of progress. And it's also like here, new sectors, industries will be created, new jobs will be created, some will be decreased. That's how it is. However, what I see and what I believe in is that we will see more entrepreneurs, and not just entrepreneurs who are fully dedicated into one business. I see people being employed somewhere, maybe not 40 hours, but 20 or 30 hours, and then having 1-2 side businesses based on AI. That's how we see it. We see more and more younger founders, and we see more and more older founders based on the numbers we have. Now we have the highest number of founders above 50 years of age, but also the highest number of founders below the age of 20. So we will see more entrepreneurs, even if they have a hybrid constellation with being employed somewhere, but then having their own side businesses as well. That's how I see it.
Do you agree with, didn't plan to ask it, but do you agree with Elon Musk that work will be optional later on? It will be like a hobby or of some sort? Because what you have described, in my head, personally, I think like it naturally leads to that point, right? So from 20 hours work, 20 hours work weeks and AI-based businesses to some point when it's just optional because AI does it all.
So, foreseeing this or foresighting this, it's not so easy because we're in a very complex world with different factors that affect each other. For sure, based on data and basic mathematics, you could see which direction we're moving. But I think there will be different scenarios. So the thing is, first of all, until this happens, it will take time. Because again, it's not always a tech issue why some things are not in use faster. It's a regulatory issue very often, and also a cultural one. Think about it. There's a lot of tech we can use already, but we're not using because of these factors. And then we will see different developments in terms of like how fast it will be implemented based on the city, on the region, on the country. So we will not see like the whole world changing into this direction suddenly. So there will be different kinds of speed I see, depending on where you are and so on, and the industry and the sector. But it could be at one point. I think actually doing work and working is a good thing. I do work because I think working is good. It forms your character. It forms yourself as a person. And I think if a lot of people wouldn't work, this could again cause a lot of different problems. I'm telling you this because think about it. If people stop working and they don't do anything, maybe just do some hobbies and so on, they will have a lot of time to think more. And for some, this might be good, but for some, I don't think it was good. So I think this will be could also cause a lot of
mental issues, let's say.
So I think work is actually something that distracts, and some might see it, but that's not good and so on. But actually, I think that's one of the reasons work is there as well. So I think we need to be occupied with something, do something. And
I heard another day. I heard the saying another day that being focused is actually being at peace. So.
Because I imagine myself now, I don't work anymore. I can have my hobbies, but I cannot do like 24 hours hobbies, maybe 7 hours of sleep. And what about the rest? So it could be that we reach this point, but I think it would still take a lot of time until we reach this.
Okay, and what are the risks of choosing the wrong approach when it comes to the integration of AI in the institutional context? So I have recently watched a film, finally, a documentary on Palantir. I think that's a very good example, but yeah, you're free to choose.
So there are some studies, by MIT, other universities, companies and so on, who do a lot of this research and so on, also by us, by the way, where we see that AI that has been implemented in companies didn't actually lead to all the positive effects that were expected. Because one, and I mentioned it before, they try to automate processes that were not good from the beginning. And that's one thing. Second, I believe trying to build an AI culture in a company is based on leadership, how you lead the company. So you need to do top down, you need to do bottom up, but you need to push it. But if you don't implement it very well, there will be, in some areas at least, people will push back. or teams or departments who will push back, and then we make it slower. So I think that's one of the reasons why all these or some of these AI-related projects fail in the end, because how it's adapted, how it's implemented. You can do it much by force and be fast, or you can try to do it to involve everyone. There are different approaches here. But that's what I think happens with some companies. They fail, or at least partly fail, because of this issue. However, I believe those who don't, particularly the bigger ones, who are not fast enough to implement AI and also effectively, they will fall behind. That's what's going to happen. It is already happening. Maybe in some areas you don't need it so much. If you're a very small company, you can just say, okay, I'm only human first. Personal servicing could also work. But for the big ones, where there are a lot of processes, where it's about time efficiency, if you don't implement it successfully and not fast enough and not efficient enough, you will fall behind, and the others will be even faster than before. So think about it. We live in a world, that's how we see it, where we're moving into even more to the very top. At the very top, you have a few ones who actually have the big bunch of the market and have much more economies of scale and are much more successful compared to others. Think about, let's say, the stocks. If you take a look at the top 10 companies in the world based on market capitalization, top 10, they have the big bunch of all the market capitalization. Then you have the second tier, then the third tier, and so on. And that's how we see it's going on, or how we are going to move. So I think the goal for the most ambitious companies is to get to the very top. Now, from an ideological point of view, some might see it negatively. Why is it like this? Why do the ones on the top have even more, become bigger and so on? I understand, but that's how it is. And that's what this kind of tech is leading to as well, if some use it faster than you do.
And what is one capability, technical, organizational, or ethical, that Austrian institutions must develop urgently if they want to remain sovereign rather than dependent in an AI-driven future?
I mean, the thing is, there's always this discussion, we lose too much US tech, from cloud servicing to AI and so on. Yeah, we do. I mean, all these companies are now present in Europe as well, headquarters. They create a lot of value, create a lot of jobs. I mean, some lobbyists, from these tech companies, and particularly US ones, they try to say that's not possible, to build like full sovereignty in Europe and so on. Actually, it is possible. You see it in other countries, other smaller countries, they do it. From Israel to even Switzerland now, or China. So it's possible if you want to do it. But if you want to stay fully sovereign, you need, have their own LLM models that are like big players. You need to push for them. You need to invest into them, and you need to use them. The same with cloud servicing, etc. I don't think that we will build full sovereignty in all these areas, and I'm not sure if we need it. And I also don't think that that because in terms of like LLM models, we're already behind the game and we will not keep up with them. I don't think like this. I think the AI game will be decided in more in the practical approach of the product. So meaning those who apply AI in the market based on LLM models, these are the companies that actually will be the ones leading the way in the future. And that's where Europe still can do a lot of stuff and build great companies. But yeah, so think about it from cloud servicing to LLM models to also defense, stuff like this. That's where you can build sovereignty. Supply chain, value chain creation in Europe, also when it comes to production. But that's not so easy, You can just say, yeah, let's do it and so on. But producing something in Europe is more expensive than somewhere else, for instance. Or regulation is higher to implement an AI model. So these are aspects that slow it down, prevent it, or whatever. But this would be the things. But again, I think the application of AI, the practical one in the market, That will be the decisive aspect in the end. But let's see.
If not sovereign fully, as you mentioned, then dependent partially on whom, potentially?
So, the thing we have in Europe...
No. Keep.
The thing we have in Europe, we are fragmented. So, when we say sovereign, in an ideal environment, European nations would come together and build European solutions. Like they did with EIDS, the company behind Airbus. That's how we will build it. Or not one Germany, one France, one UK, or whatever. We come together and build it, and together we could build it. Now you see like some kind of national sovereignty initiatives, depending on the countries. Yeah, they have to build a good product, but it's still just national and not for all of Europe. So potentially it is possible to build sovereignty, but it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of investment, and it takes a lot of commitment to do it. But we are fragmented, Also political, we have the European Union, and then we have like the European nations. A lot of the laws we have here on national basis is also based on the European Union level, but the lobbying that takes part there is very nationalistic very often, based in nationalistic in terms of nationalist in terms of you want to push your nation's agenda there and not just the European one. I can give you an example with now the Mercosur pact between Latin America and Europe. It took 20 years, 25 years to do it. First of all, why so long? And second, until the very end, it was not clear if we will do it, build one of the biggest, if not the biggest, economic trade association that is out there. And it's very important. Geopolitically and economically, it's very important for Europe to have this kind of alliances. But it took a lot of time because, there were national interests. France didn't want to implement it. Italy then changed from no to yes, and it was implemented because of a lot of national interest groups. Think about it. Just in Austria, you have federal, and then you have all the states, 9, and then all the stakeholders. And everyone have their own interests. They don't think comprehensively. They don't think like this, and they don't act like this. And then multiply it with all the countries we have in Europe and the ones then in the European Union. What is happening there? That are the issues that prevent us still to move faster here.
So being fragmented, right? Staying fragmented in a way, in decision making as well. But what about China? Because sometimes it seems to some people that Europe is leaning more towards China at the moment, or at least it was, and now it's more uncertain whom to lean towards to.
So now we're getting politics. I think politics in Europe, at least not all, and some politicians still haven't understood that we live in different times, that the US we have known is not the US that's going to be here now in the next couple of years. There will not be a abrupt change. I think that's very unrealistic. And they still, tend and land over the past and the history. I think that's over. And they need to wake up to understand how the world is going on, what's happening here. So I think going for alliances and collaboration is always better. But first of all, we need to push ourselves, on the global stage again, with technology, with companies, with good policy making and so on. We're open-minded. And start to focus on doing stuff on our own, including defense, for instance. We need defense, sovereign defense in Europe. We need it. That's a pool, a source of innovation. And we need it because if we don't have this in this world we are now, if you really still think we can do what we did the last couple of decades, that's over. That's how I see it. It's good to stick to some core values, but we also need to adjust because think about it. Again, history repeats itself to some extent. China was always actually big, always economically very big. But at one point of time, they were stagnating. Particularly when it came to the industrialization, well, at this point of time, Europe was moving, progressing, and China was left behind. And they still had this moral compass, to be morally, above everyone else, to believe, okay, then still, the history, the background, they have all the experience. They were left behind. because they became too morally arrogant to see, hey, the others are moving and we're not. So it put them back for decades, but they've changed it again. And we need to be very careful in Europe to understand that we need to be sovereign, become more sovereign, become more self-confident. Don't stick to the past, and get in touch on negotiate again on eye level, but that's only possible if we come much more together and forget all these national interests. That's how I see it. It doesn't mean it will happen, but that's how I see it. But let's see, again, I don't see like everything too critical and negative. There are always ups and downs. Circumstances change, and this can lead then to other types of decision making.
Looking ahead, given rising geopolitical tensions that we mentioned, and economic fragmentation that we mentioned, what financial principle do founders in emerging technologies need to internalize early to build resilient, not just fundable companies?
So first, as long as it's possible, if you're not a deep tech company with a lot of R&D science, which takes years of development, and then after 6-7 years, you can start commercializing it. If it's not like this, and most startups are like this, so most are software oriented, then I would try to stay as long independent as possible, and get money into the company by selling the product successfully. So focus on the business modeling, how you can make money from day one or day zero, and that's how you should grow. I also see like in terms of like the funding environment, more companies trying to focus on pre-seed and seed stage in terms of funding, making bigger rounds when it comes to seed, then skipping maybe Series A, and then after several years, then again going to, more directly towards Series B and C, stuff like this. We also see more bootstrap startups, solo founded startups. The landscape has changed. 90% of all the allocated capital last year was moved into AI. I mean, okay, maybe this is a bit inflationary. Why I'm telling you this, because 10 years ago, 5 years ago, this company would have not called them AI company, but let's say education company or life science company, whatever. Now everyone is saying, okay, yeah, that's why it's a bit inflationary, but still a lot of it's going there. And it's not like very democratic. The big part goes on more into only a few companies. Even if there are like hundreds of companies, still we have like hundreds of thousands of startups. Think about it. And as I see overall the movement in the world, it's a movement into the very top. So the one in the top 10, top 20 are generating the most capital and the most value. That's how I see it. Also when it comes to startup. So the thing is, if it's possible, stay independent, build a great business model, start selling the product as early as it gets, and that's how you should grow. And if you take funding, only do this if you want to grow much faster, or if you want to optimize for profitability, which you would do usually later. So very interesting. Also, the VC space is changing. The VC funds also they have also struggling, getting enough capital, because a lot of the investors during the pandemics are not investing anymore because they are thinking in different asset classes, and they invested at the very height when it comes to valuation. They're also not fully dedicated into venture capital and startups. Also see the big VC funds now moving more into private equity as well, so a combination. And then I see smaller VC funds focusing on very, a specific topic, let's say creators economy or sports, and setting up a shareholder structure, an investor structure, where there are people from the industry then again who can be used to market this kind of product. So very interesting movements happening. But if it's possible, stay dependent, build your business, make as fast money as it gets, and also take a look what is happening worldwide, also in emerging hubs, not just in the Western Hemisphere, but a lot of other markets that are growing.
Do you see Asia as something worthy of European founders' attention?
Asia?
Yeah. Asia is big, I know, but
100%. From GCC, Gulf Cooperation countries, to India, to Southeast Asia, a lot of things are happening. You see also more European founders there. They're looking also for good talent, also from Europe, to value European founders. But also you can build a business here and then scale there. That's what I would take a look at. Not just starting in Austria, going to Germany, Western Europe, and then the US. You can do this. But what about India? What about Vietnam? What about some extent China? What about GCC? There are a lot of options. There are as many options as never before. You can see it. You see a lot of capital flowing into this region as well. I mean, more.
Sometimes I hear that some people mentioned people who succeeded in building startups and so on, that a lot of founders are sleeping on Arab Bolt that is about to open their doors, maybe a bit more, right? And there is a lot of capital there and so on, and there will be a lot of changes towards the outflow of even talent there. And we see now, for instance, in Dubai, right? What happens in Dubai? People are flying there, opening companies and so on. From the regulatory perspective as well, it's and the congregation of bright minds as well. It's very important. Partially why Singapore, have been rising. So,
So regarding this, I mean, I'm very active in this region, and there's still differences. You cannot say the whole GCC because it's different if you're the Emirates or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. There's a lot of talent inflow coming, but not just good people. I can tell you. You see a mix also in the Emirates. You see a lot of talented people, but also scammers as well, and not so talented people. And not everyone who's going there is becoming successful. I can tell you this as well. You need to be disciplined. You need to be hardworking. You need to do good qualitative work. But they have evolved over time. So they are very international, and getting talents from all over the world leads to competition, but also openness or co-petition. And this creates even more, a source of innovation. What I still think they're lacking is science and R&D. They're working on it with the universities, research institutions, but this takes time. This is not something being built in 2-3 years. It takes 10 years, even more, decades. But they think and act like this and also implement it. And then, so it's very interesting. First of all, they're attracting people, also particularly from Europe. Until now, they were not focusing so much on early stage in this region. They were looking more for scale-ups who are already established, let's say in Austria, Germany, UK, wherever, and then attract them. Now in UAE, you see also focusing on a lot on early stage as well, pre-seed founders, seed founders, and so on. Then you see some kind of competition between the hubs there, Emirates being still leading, but Saudi Arabia coming. They are also competing with each other, so it's very interesting to see how it works out. They've implemented different types of regulation where they try to get the companies from each other, for instance. Qatar is still lagging behind, but a lot of capital as well. They're trying to push. Let's see. But you have the others as well, like Bahrain, or Oman, for instance. So very interesting. But it doesn't mean you go there, you become successful. It's the same with Silicon Valley. It's not like you go there, you become successful, and everyone is waiting for you. You need to be disciplined. You need to be committed. You need to work a lot. You need to have an open mind, get in touch with the right people, be in exchange. And then the chances are very high, to become very successful because they have an open culture, an open culture for innovation, do something new. And that's very important. I would say also Europe is fragmented and there are differences. So depending where you are, there's a different kind of mindsets. Still, overall, we have started to lack this kind of culture in terms of being open for anything, focusing more on preventing, but also don't see too negative. I also think this will change again because life is always like, ups and downs. And still, I would take a look what is happening and try, to build a company like this. Myself, I'm very active in Central Eastern Europe, but also in GCC, in India, and parts of Africa. And see how it goes further.
Where do you see the most meaningful intersection between AI, blockchain, and traditional Austrian industries over the next few years?
I mean, everything related to finance, payment, for sure. I think that's set. Let's see how it works when it comes to defense and security. This will be interesting. Let's see if health can kick off. I think here we are a little bit too conservative, to adopt this faster. These are the ones I see very concretely. And apart from that, very difficult, to foresee everything, because things happening in quantum technology, in space, material technology, they create so many new things. We cannot be 100% sure aware of it now, how it turns out. We can have some kind of estimations and planning and so on. It's not easy to fully foresee this.
Looking 10 years ahead, what decision made today by founders, institutions, or policymakers even will be either will we either regret most or be most proud of?
So not adjusting AI fast enough, whether it's in the private or in the public space. Not focusing on core, technologies, and not too many. Focus more on, let's say, 2, 3, where we want to become world-class and the best. I think that's very important, because this will attract a lot of talents from all over the world, and also get a lot of all the other sectors, industries going, and not see what is happening really in all these emerging hubs and the ones that are popping up. I think that's very important to understand. So take even more a look at what is happening globally and use this for yourself.
Where can listeners follow your work or thinking, get in touch with you, and learn more about the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber?
Sure. Just for you, the Chamber of Commerce is representing roughly 600,000 companies in Austria. We have 3 pillars of activities: servicing, education, and the policy making, the lobbying part. We support companies before foundation until going global in all the different life cycles they have. So you can get in touch with us or me very easily. You can go to our website, you can go to my LinkedIn profile, you can call me, you can write me on WhatsApp. So actually almost every channel is out there where people get in touch with me, not just in Austria, but very international. So if you want to get in touch, if you seek support in whatever way, just reach out through one of these channels.
I'll include all the links in the description, right, to this video. So, Kambis, thanks for the clarity and depth you brought to these important topics today. It was very insightful. And to everyone listening or watching, like, subscribe, or follow, both of us, and share this episode with someone curious.